I think we are going to get started. I'm sure people will jump on, and we also, of course, are recording this so that people can listen to it as a podcast as well. I want to welcome you all tonight to Let's Talk, our first Interfaith Voices on Israel as a mini series that we've begun. My name, as many of you know, is Alyssa Thomas Newborn, and I'm the Rabbanit at Congregation Netivot Shalom in Teaneck. I'm also a board certified chaplain at a local New York City hospital, and I'm the president of Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains. It's my privilege that I am going to be able to have this conversation tonight with Bishop Dr. Kenneth Ulmer. I want to express tremendous gratitude to him for being with us and spending time with us. To all of you who are taking the time to be with us live tonight so that we can have this interaction, anyone who is going to be listening to this after, and of course, thanking our co-sponsoring organizations, Netivot Shalom, Moishe House based in, the International Rabbinic Fellowship, and Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains. In this series, we're going to hear diverse faith leaders across America discuss their personal and religious connections to Israel. Each of these sessions will feature a positive interfaith bridge builder. Our sessions are going to be virtual and recorded, as I mentioned, accessible on Neshama Cast, which is Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains podcast. You can listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. Feel free to throw questions in the chat directly to me so that I can weave them in the dialogue with Bishop Dr. Kenneth Ulmer. The series, in terms of how it began and how we're starting this discussion, was really honestly in response to the division, distrust, and isolation that the Jewish community has felt since October 7th. In addition to the heartbreak and horrors of that day, there's been a widespread loss of interfaith relationships among friends and colleagues. And as a chaplain working in a multi-faith context and as a congregational leader, I've heard people question whether they can trust others they've worked with for years, neighbors they were once living in harmony with, and the rise of anti-Semitism, according to the ADL, has increased 361% since October 7th. In my own neighborhood, many of you are a part of this, in Teaneck, we've witnessed protesters shouting, "Gas the Jews," something that I never could have imagined being repeated in 2023 or 2024. And so many of us in the Jewish community, but also beyond the Jewish community, are living with grief and trauma and re-traumatization from the images we saw on social media and the direct losses of life that we continue to experience. The purpose of this series, though, is not to talk about the Israel-Gaza war. It's to share positive stories and connections across interfaith communities. We know that the news is often full of pain and loss, and sometimes it can be unclear and accurate about what is even true. And arguing across communities on social media is impossible and maddening and doesn't actually build any sort of connection. But hearing directly from another person face to face accesses truth and shared humanity. So through these sessions, my prayer is that we will strive to build positive connections around Israel through our diverse faiths' relationships to the Holy Land. I am so grateful and proud to be able to say that I personally have worked with and learned from each of the speakers who are part of this, including Bishop Dr. Kenneth Ulmer. So let's do this. In tonight's discussion, we have the privilege to learn from Bishop Dr. Kenneth Ulmer's personal and religious relationship with Israel. He's going to share his voice and heart as a faith leader who is a longtime friend of the Jewish people. I'm going to read his bio. He told me that I had the ability to cut parts of it. The truth is, it's like a book in and of itself, and he's written many, many books. Dr. Ulmer is the former president of the King's University in Los Angeles, where he also serves as a founding board member, adjunct professor, and dean of the King's at Oxford, an annual summer session held at Oxford University. He has an incredible amount of degrees. It's off the charts. He has his bachelor's in broadcasting and music from the University of Illinois. After accepting his call to ministry, he founded Macedonia Bible Church in San Pedro, California. He studied at Pepperdine. He studied at the Hebrew Union College and the University of Judaism in Los Angeles, as well as Christ Church and Wadham College at Oxford University in England. He has a Ph.D. from Grace Graduate School in Theology in Long Beach. He was awarded an honorary Doctor of Divinity from Southern California School of Ministry. He received his Doctor of Ministry from Union Theological Seminary, and he's participated in the study of ecumenical liturgy and worship at Magdalene College at Oxford University in England. He's been an instructor of pastoral ministry and homiletics at Grace Theological Seminary, an adjunct professor at Biola University, and an adjunct professor at Pepperdine. He's also served as a mentor in the Doctor of Ministry degree program at Union Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. Dr. Ulmer became a consecrated bishop of Christian education of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship, where he served as a founding member of the Bishop's Council. He has served on the board of directors of the Gospel Music Workshop of America, the Pastors Advisory Council to the mayor and the city of Inglewood, California, and on the board of trustees of Southern California School of Ministry. He's currently the presiding bishop over Macedonia International Bible Fellowship, based in Johannesburg, South Africa, which is an association of pastors representing ministries in Africa and the US. He's written so many books and has many sermons available online. I encourage you to watch them. It's inspiring. He's an amazing, amazing speaker. Dr. Ulmer and his wife are residents of Los Angeles. They've been married for 38 years and have 47. 40 years. What?
47.
47. Oh my gosh. Okay. 7 years. And he's been in the ministry for 40. He has 2 daughters, 1 son, and 5 grandchildren. So I just want to say, before we officially begin this discussion and hear from him, because I don't want you to be hearing my voice the whole time, I just want to say that I first met Bishop Ulmer while attending his church when they had a vigil for the victims of the Pittsburgh shooting. He and his community have always been an amazing friend to the Jewish people and have a moral commitment to serving those in need and those who are marginalized. And specifically during the pandemic, amidst the protests with George Floyd, our community that I worked in then, B'nai David Judea Congregation, and his church, Faithful Central Bible Church, FCBC, partnered in creating a program, a cohort called Building Bridges. And it was 2 cohorts of parents with younger children and parents with older children, who met on Zoom regularly between our community and his community to discuss what it was like and process and support each other in being parents during the pandemic. Everyone has the shared experience of dealing with Zoom and how we take care of our kids and all of the fear around that. And we really wanted to build a bridge in an area that we had commonality and connection, which was parenting. And there were deep connections built through that. It was such a privilege to be able to have that grounding support at that time. And Pastor Casey, who was involved in it there, also was phenomenal, and I continue to be friends with her. So in short, I have already benefited from Bishop Ulmer's leadership and partnership across faith communities, and I'm so honored tonight to welcome him to this program. So we want to get to know you, in addition to your phenomenal bio. Tell us about your background, your work, and your faith community.
Oh, let's see how much time we have here. That could take a while. Let me just say, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. And to all of you who are joining us, each of you should have Alyssa on your staff. I mean, you ought to clone her and just send her out to everybody. But I just commend her for her spirit of excellence, and thank you for inviting me. Telling my story, I'm not sure where to start. I think my life has changed several times. I'll give you some examples of when it changed or shifted. But in terms of my relationship with the Jewish community, it started on 2 levels. Once when I took 2 trips. The first time I went to South Africa, and the first time I went to Israel. When I went to South Africa, I went 2 months after Nelson Mandela was released from prison. He was out of Robben Island. He got out in February. I think I met him in April. But it changed my life because I felt like I had finally made a connection with my ethnic roots, the continent of Africa, tribes of Africa, etc. And so that trip was a connection with my ethnic roots. My life was also changed the first time I went to Israel many years ago. And I felt then that I had finally made a connection with my spiritual roots. And so this convergence of paths of my journey, ethnically through South Africa and spiritually through Israel, and it changed my life. On another level, I was a student at Hebrew Union College here in California. They had a partnership with University of Southern California, and I took this class. That class, again, changed my life. The name of the class was Judaism and Christian Beginnings, and it reinforced theologically, spiritually, even emotionally, it reinforced the idea of unity and oneness, of two religious traditions who shared a common ground of growth and maturity. And that class changed my life. As I was telling Alyssa later, the professor and I became very close friends, and we taught that class at Oxford one summer. And likewise, students' lives were changed. So I think it begins with a journey of exposure, a journey of vulnerability, a journey of shared experiences. And we often, we talk about the whole slavery motif, and that's real also. But for me, it has been on another level, and that is to walk with people, to share with friends, to share experiences of those who, when we go back, as a friend of mine says, back to the day before yesterday, we find that, as it is often said, we often have more in common than we do differences.
I love that so much. And I love that there's the relationship with starting at the beginning. And, we talked a little bit, like we may end up in different places, but we have that shared beginning. And I'm wondering, you mentioned that you had that trip to Israel. That was something that changed your life. Since our topic is Israel, I'm wondering if you can share with us, in your faith tradition, what the role of the land of Israel is, so that we can get a better sense of.
We share exhortations, we share revelations, we share lessons from some of the same text. Our terrible way to put this. So if I offend anybody, don't take it wrong. Our Bible includes yours, and so anything from first 2/3 of our Bible, we're on common ground, and the exhortation to pray for Israel rings clear in my tradition and even in my experience. And so as I made a connection when I went to Israel the first time, there's a theological, biblical connection with this mutual exhortation to pray for Israel. I found that, and I'm sure you have, that in various religions, even various factions and families of Christianity, that verse is more or less emphasized depending upon who's doing the reading and who's there. But it has come to mean much to me because I believe it is a standing exhortation, especially in light of the things that are happening now in the world. And so I take that personally. I take it personally with relationships that I have with friends who are in your community. And so we have this shared exhortation to pray for Jerusalem. In the Christian Bible, Jesus cried twice. He wept twice. He wept over a dying city, and he wept over a dead friend. There's a passage in the Christian Bible where it says, and he was on the Mount of Olives, and he saw Israel, and the Bible says he saw the city, and he wept. He wept over a city in turmoil, a city in struggle, a city under siege, a city with divisions, and yet his expression, his response was, he wept. And I pray that there would be this common caring based on our sensitivity to the centrality of the nation and the world, and certainly that city of Jerusalem. I don't take it lightly. I've taken out 8-10 tours and taken people over there, and almost to a person, my life was changed. My life was changed. So I think for me, it is not only personal, it is a spiritual connection. It is a biblical connection. It is shared exhortations that I take very seriously, and uh, and to then share that with the congregation and with the community that, for whatever reason, and many reasons, may have been separated and or even divided or even unaware of those kinds of historical, theological, biblical connections. And so I think that the call on my life, the call on my life has often been to hold hands with a group over here and hold hands with a group over here, and then try to bring those together. That's kind of the thing that was happening with the experience that you had with our young people. We did a I don't call it an exercise, but we had a relationship with some of you guys may know of Wilshire Boulevard Temple here in Los Angeles, major Jewish temple. And so the rabbi there, a good friend of mine, he and I came together and we shared. We formed a class. I think it was 20 people from his synagogue and 20 from our church, and the two of us co-taught through the book of Exodus. And so we taught the whole Exodus experience from a Christian perspective, from a Jewish perspective, from a historical perspective. And there are people, this was, oh gosh, this had to be 5-6 years ago. And there are friends in our church right now who are still friends with members of those classes, and they share birthdays and bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and potlucks and soul food and everything, you know. But the relationships that came out of that, I think, are a demonstration of what can happen when we set aside the things that can divide us and we meet on common ground.
So beautifully said. And I think that you're speaking to so many of our hearts, and that feeling of finding spirituality and grounding and, you know, a greater purpose in our service of the world in dialogue with Israel and Jerusalem and what it represents. And I, you know, again, I've been inside your church. I've seen how giving and loving people are, and that you really, it's not something you say, it's something that you truly do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, we can feel it through what you're saying now as well.
I feel, well, and I don't want to start quoting statistics, but I am just so grieved. Grieved is a good word. I am so grieved at the mounting anti-Semitism, anti-everyism. You know, a friend of mine used to say we're divided by schisms and isms that should be wasms. You know, but the things that divide and the hatred and the bitterness and the grief, it breaks my heart. And to know or to feel that we on this call we represent groups and ethnicities and that are the targets of wow, it just breaks my heart. And that there's a generation coming up, your kids, my grandkids, you know, who are seeing all this going on, and what, Papa, what's happening, and you know, what's this all about? And so I think that there is a mandate for many of us to be on, not only on the front line, but to be in the middle of these kinds of dichotomies and splits, and have the opportunity to sow good seeds into the next generation of observers and the next, our children, our grandchildren, and to show them another way, to demonstrate another way. I was doing a lecture, excuse me, I was doing a lecture in Detroit the week that the MLK movie came out, one of the MLK movies came out, and I was doing a lecture on Jewish-Christian relationships, et cetera. And I had a hard time. I had a hard time with that lecture in Detroit, because when that movie came out, one of the pictures that I use in our lectures of bringing these, of both Christians and Jews, was a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King and the, oh gosh, I revered so much, Rabbi Abraham Eshel holding, locking arms. And so that was one of the graphics that we used, and that movie dropped that weekend, and I had seen it, and it broke my heart. How someone made the executive decision to edit that scene and to cut out Rabbi Heschel and to put in an Orthodox guy or somebody else. But that scene in that movie was edited from a mindset that gave the wrong impression to whoever was watching that movie. It was historically inaccurate. And the irony was, as I said, that we had this graphic, this big picture of the two of them, we shall overcome it on, and then this movie drops and Rabbi Heschel is not even in there. Someone made an executive decision. We don't want to show that kind of unity. But for whatever reason, let's change that. Let's rewrite history. That's why the class that I think I told you about at Hebrew Union changed my life, because history is what history is, and it is there. And this common ground of our religious traditions, I think, becomes a platform. It becomes a platform for each of us who stand on that platform, and then we are thrust into your community and my community and your synagogue and my church, etc. And I think with a mandate to wave the flag of our commonality and our unity.
Well, I love also that example you gave of co-teaching the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot. And you mentioned obviously the trope of slavery, but the fact that in each of our traditions there's a refrain from God to always remember that we were once the other, we were once slaves in Egypt, and what it means to always tell our story. And I've been involved recently in I mentioned this to you, the World Congress on Moral Injury, Trauma, Spirituality, and Healing. And one of the big discussions among many of the people at that conference, which is part of Harvard's Human Flourishing department, has been the impact of social media on young people, older people, in terms of how we connect and how we feel maybe that we're deeply invested or responding to something so intensely and viscerally, not necessarily even dealing with facts or dealing with history. And then there's no follow-up of a relationship. There's no additional connection. And that also breeds a sense of moral injury that we're carrying, and trauma, especially when we're exposed to traumatic images. So I think what you're saying, that we have to hold on to the commonality and we have to see ourselves and situate ourselves in history, and look for those moments of positivity and connection, is it's a spiritual calling. And it's something that isn't easy to do.
I think it is. It is a spiritual calling. And I think I had a mentor, pastor friend of mine, like a spiritual father, who would say, be careful because God will call your bluff. I think that God often entrusts us with experiences and revelations, and then we'll turn around and providentially orchestrate, or the Bible says that God, the steps of a good man are ordered, and God will order your steps to a situation, a circumstance where you can then share or choose not to share what he's taught you, what you've learned, the commonality, the value of unity, and you have the opportunity to do that, or you have the opportunity to, as Dionne Warwick, you don't know Dionne Warwick, you're too young. Dionne Warwick said, to walk on by. But it amazes me how God, revelation and relationship and insight is a trust. God, I think God trusts us with experiences like this. God trusts us when he allows our lives to cross with those who are different and yet like us. Mm-hmm. God trusts us with those kind of experiences. And here's a Christian term, it then becomes a part of what we call in Christianity, a part of your stewardship. Stewardship basically means, what do you do with what God gave you? How do you handle what God gave you? And so God gives us these experiences, and maybe Included in that is what we may learn or share in this gathering here. And somewhere down the line, in a class, in a parking lot, I don't know, in a movie, whatever, God says, now, what are you going to do with that? You have an opportunity to share that. It could be with your own children, your own friends, but you've learned something. You've seen a dimension. You've seen a side of God. You've seen a revelation of the heart of God for oneness and unity and love and compassion. And he will orchestrate, he will order, he will providentially create circumstances in which he'll toss the ball to you and say, now, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? Sometimes it's more comfortable to just join Dion and walk on by. But there's that challenge of stewardship. I've taught you something. You've seen something. You've learned something. Now share it.
Thank you for not walking on by
Mm-hmm.
in so many ways. I'm wondering, in relation to that, especially since we're speaking about commonality and the shared beginnings in the land of Israel, both if you have reflections on why you think Israel is such a holy place for so many faiths, and also if you can share maybe some windows into your moments where you didn't walk on by in your experience with Israel, or from your visits, the things that maybe stand out to you that you've taught in your congregation too.
Yeah, I think I think that those answers are often theological, sometimes
Yeah.
complex. It's almost like God said, "Here's what I'm going to do. Now watch me. I'm going to protect. I'm going to shield. You're going to go through this. You're going to go through that. I'm going to pull you through." A friend of mine used to say, God can pull you through, but it might be a tight squeeze. And I've pulled you through some stuff. You've seen some stuff. Your family, your grandparents, your great grandparents, your relatives, whatever. And now, what do you do with that? And he will orchestrate circumstances where you have an opportunity to speak up or shut up or whatever. And then the challenge is on us. The challenge is on us.
Do you, within your tradition, is there anything about um, there being concentrated holiness in a physical space in the world? Like for example, in our tradition, there is, a kedusha, a holiness that exists. Certainly, in relation to the temple, there's, we speak about being outside of Israel with very different language than we speak about being in Israel. So I'm wondering, especially for maybe those who don't know as much about your tradition, if you could share, that concept of holiness.
I think in our tradition, the Shekinah of God, the glory of God, the manifest presence of God, still does come forth and is still revealed in the earth realm, we would say, in the realm of the natural, we would say, on a city, excuse me, that's been through this and been through that, on a people that have been through this and that have been through that, history and persecution and yet there's still this remnant. There's still this this germinating seed that is often passed down from one generation to the next, and in the end, God gets glory. It can be the gathering in a place, in a holy place. I've been to places, and I've led tours in Jerusalem, where and Israel, where we've come on to certain places, and I've seen people just break out in tears. No one says anything. No one says anything. But there's something about just the presence, the glory of God. We in our tradition, we talk about the glory of God falling on a place or resting on a place. And I've been in worship services where the glory of God the concentrated glory of God is so thick you can almost feel it. The unity in that space, in that place. And I've seen it in great cathedrals, and I've seen it in what we call storefront churches.
Mm.
There's a verse in the Christian Bible where it says, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered, God is there." And I've seen it in thousands, and I've seen it in cathedrals, and I've seen it in arenas, and I've seen it in small churches with the sign written on a piece of cardboard outside. And yet that glory of God, the presence of God is there. I've seen it in throngs of thousands, and I've seen it in a family holding hands at a memorial, at a funeral. Like one of my best friends died yesterday, and we were in that hospital room Saturday. About 4 of us just holding hands, and this man was our common ground. He was someone in that room. He was her husband. It was my friend. He was a grandfather, a father, and our common ground was this man. And just the presence of God in this hospital room, where 3 days later, in our tradition, we would say 3 days later, the death angel came, and he died yesterday. But the presence of God, the glory of God, the realness of the here-ness of God, he's here. It's inexplainable. It's inexplicable.
I want to thank you. I know you mentioned George had passed away, and in our tradition, we say, may his neshama have an aliyah, may his soul ascend, and may his memory be a source of comfort and blessing. And I was thinking before you even said that, and I really want to thank you for sharing with everyone here about the loss of your friend. It's amazing you were able to be with him and his family. And I want to share that in our tradition as well, there's a belief that God's presence is most concentrated at the head of the bed of someone who is ill.
Wow.
And so it's when you're saying it's like inexplicable, we're with you. The people listening to me we get that.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, the vulnerability that it takes to be in that space, and God joining and holding someone there too. I mean, I can say that's why I love hospital chaplaincy, because I do feel like it's entering into a sanctuary.
That's what you do. Yeah.
And it is the moments when we've experienced that holiness in the world, for many of us, it has been in Israel. Like, that's where a lot of people have that greatest, where you said the tears flow. And God's presence, it's true, is also everywhere. We have, kid songs of God is here, God is there, God is truly everywhere. And just recognizing that presence is with us always. And also carving out the spaces for holiness in our prayer communities. And then certainly, Israel itself is something that, again, unites us and is common ground. I want to say, if anyone who is listening wants to send me a question, I'm happy to share any questions that people have, or put some questions together. So feel free to message me privately in the chat if you'd like to add anything to ask our wonderful Bishop Dr. Ulmer. I'm going to ask if, in the context of our discussion on Israel, if you could maybe share, when you take people on trips, where you take people. Because I think also that's, that experience of going on a mission is something that extends across faiths. But we haven't been on a Bishop Ulmer mission. So I'd love to just hear a little glimpse of that.
I'll tell you my best tours, trips, and I'll tell you my worst. I have one worst, and I have to be careful how I tell it. My best the best tour guides have been Jewish scholars. And they've been the best because they share the history, they share the theology, and they also share the sensitivity to explaining all of this stuff to, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 African-American Christians. And my best tour guides have been those who are sensitive to that. Bar none, they've been the best. The worst that I've had, when I say this, was Said the worst guide I ever had was a Muslim guide who said almost nothing about the Jewish or the Christian traditions in the spots that we went to. It was amazing to me. It was amazing to me that he de-emphasized not only the Christian histories but even the Jewish locations and spots. That was the worst. That was the worst. And I don't say that to mark. I say that to emphasize his again, lack of, I don't know, could have been lack of knowledge, but his lack of sensitivity of the people that he was leading. And again, it would be different if he would just did all the Jewish spots and had no inclusion of the Christians, but he didn't include any of us. You know, he left y'all out too, so he left everybody out. So, but it was the worst I've had. But I think the ones who find the common ground, and to see how their knowledge, their experiences, and their sensitivity has changed the lives of people who are on those tours. Bless them.
Seeing ourselves in that, like that history, and that how many people have stood where I've stood, and how many people who believe totally different things have stood where I've stood. I hear exactly what you're saying, that it's missing something, and sort of not just the narrative of one faith, but the narrative of humanity.
Yeah.
So I have, I'm going to blend two questions that I got in the chat. There's a request if you can speak to some of the breakdown between the Black community and the Jewish community. And I know that's a huge question. I'm going to blend it with within Teaneck specifically, which is where my congregation, Nativot Shalom, is. There's been a very big divide, certainly since October 7th, but a racial divide, where there isn't significant relationship building as much as we would love with the Jewish community and the Black community. So another way of framing the question, of reflecting on that division or breakdown in relationships, is what steps we can take to open hands and minds.
I think I'll try to come at it from a couple of different ways. I'll say a tendency. The tendency on my side of the room, the tendency on my crowd, the tendency will almost always lean toward the identified or implied. Be careful how I choose my word. The identified or implied oppressed. And I'm not, and I want to be careful, because I'm not talking for all the Black people in the history of the world. I'm just talking with one person. Okay, so you got that. But I think it is the it will be siding with the identified or the implied position of the oppressed. We've been there, done that, and when you couple that with that category of the oppressed, is seldom, or I'll say not enough, it seldom includes the broader Jewish community. And I'm trying to be very careful how I choose my words, because I want to express be clear. In other words, on my side of town, we will almost always historically, culturally, psychologically lean toward the implied or identified oppressed, and take that stand opposite, against, in opposition to the power that be. Okay, I'm trying to be clear on this. And yeah. So here's my point. So the kinds of divisions, I mean, I have friends. One of my closest friends there, he pastored a church in New York, 116th Street, Canaan Baptist Church of Christ in Harlem, New York. If you guys ever go there, it's still there. Harlem, New York, 116th Street in New York. He pastored. He was one of my best, dearest friends, one of my mentors, etc. was oh gosh, the the general, oh gosh, the Arab, not the Arab guy, oh gosh, I'm losing my thoughts. Oh my gosh, the mm. So listen, here's your lesson. When you get 76, two things go. Okay, your memory goes first, and I forgot the second one. But when you get so your mind just goes, oh gosh,
You're talking about 116th and a Harlem church.
yeah, no. I'm saying I'm trying to the picture the guy who used to wear
Yeah,
the
yeah.
turban, the Arab guy, general, where it was. Um, oh gosh, it'll come in a minute. But his whole thing was his wall was plastered with Arab, leaders. And in New York, right where you are, the Harlem church community, the African American church community, almost always leaned toward that side, who they saw and identified as the oppressed. So I'm saying that's a part of our culture because of our own journey of being the oppressed. And so our first response will always be, well, who's the underdog? Who's the marginalized? Who's the weak one? Again, either identified or implied. Okay, and we will almost always lean that way. And we'll lean that way by saying, been there, done that, got the T-shirt and the hat. We can relate to that. We can relate more to that side than the other side. That's more of an explanation than an excuse. Okay, that's more of an explanation than an excuse. That one would say, well, why? And in many cases, automatically, especially why automatically? Because automatically we're going to find, well, who's the underdog? It's a cultural tendency, and the manifestation is in places like Teaneck and even places here in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah.
Pick a city, pick one, where those divisions, and of course the whole Floyd and the whole COVID thing exacerbated everything. And even out here, we're still trying to mend some fences and build some bridges. It is a very painful. It is a very painful reality that that people like you and me will experience. Very painful, because we often feel, how do we bring these two together? Can we bring it? Is it ever possible for these two groups to come together? And to try to talk to one group and talk to the other group, it's a challenge, and very, very frustrating, painfully frustrating sometimes, to see that reality, and yet to have to acknowledge that that is the reality.
I want to thank you for your honesty with that and frankness to help us get a better picture. Two things I want to say. So the first is, I think that struggle of identifying with the oppressed. I, I think especially as in the Jewish narrative, that sense of when you said implied, and I know you were very specific with your wording. I don't know if and I can't speak for all Jews everywhere, but I'll speak for me and probably some of the people here. I think that the instinct is often we've never not been the oppressed. We've always been easy to kick out of a country, or never actually a part of the group, or waiting for the time where there's going to be another expulsion or persecution or
See, no, you're hitting it on the head. You're hitting on the head. And what you've just said will will shed light on the reason that, well, I'll give you a great example. The reason that Dr. King caught opposition flack. That picture of Dr. King and Dr. Heschel and Rabbi Heschel, that was an expensive picture. That was an expensive picture. And what it took for him to lock arms like that, and what it cost him in some communities, and in some communities of our community. The price is often high. I mean, you know, I'm going back now to the whole you know, the SCLC and SNCC. I'm going back to Dr. King and Malcolm, you know, and all that on our side of the fence, and what it cost to lock arms, and it cost him. I'm telling you, it cost him. It cost him. It cost him in some churches. A denomination, an African American denomination split over Dr. King. A denomination split over Dr. King, and his whole nonviolent and forming coalitions. It split the National Baptist Convention. It split them over the pacifists, if you will, the nonviolence, and the ones who were more militant. And a whole nother denomination was formed. One to follow Dr. King, one to not follow Dr. King, and it's split, you know. So I'm just saying that it can cost you. It can cost you. Bridge building is very expensive.
In that, I mean, I also want to acknowledge that you also are someone who bridge builds, and you know, you're saying that from experience. And I know that, you know, the person who asked this question in the chat asked about, you know, what would you recommend will be accepted with open hands and minds? Do you have tips or things that you've seen that have worked to build bridges?
I think you look for those, and sometimes it's a hard search. You look for those who are also looking. I think you look for those who are also looking. I think there's a guy in Chicago, young pastor, who has done some tremendous things in the African American community of South Side of Chicago, and bringing together the Jewish community. Some tremendous things, like young guy. I think you look for those kinds of partnerships. I think the things that happened with your group, and when Casey was with us, and their special, and anything you can do with young people, you know, is an open door. But I think I've had people in our congregation who you know, and we always had, when we had joint services, I had hundreds of people who didn't show up. Oh, trust me. I mean, now, when we came and we gathered and we had hundreds and hundreds, I think one time we had like 600-700 people there. You know, that's a lot of people. But remember now, we would see, you know, 2,000 people on a Sunday morning. So 600, 700, 800, 900, you know, but I was willing, and this is almost to say it was frightening sometimes, to pay the cost for that. It cost me. Oh, sure it did. Oh, sure it did. It cost me. It cost me. When we had those unity services, it cost me. I had to pay a price. I think, so you ask, what can you do? I think you look for those who are willing to pay the price. You look for those willing to pay the price. It cost me. It cost. I'd been there a while, so I overcame it. But I'm just saying, when we would announce it on we usually have them in the afternoon. We announced that. I pretty much knew he won't come, and she's not going to be there, and he won't be there. You know, they're not. You know, they're not. As we say, they're not feeling me. They're not feeling me. But that's up you. What can you do? I think you look for those. You may even pray for those. Pray to find those who are willing to pay the price. Dr. King, I'm telling you, that picture with Rabbi, that was a very expensive picture. So much so that somebody edited it and took the rabbi out. They took the rabbi out. They felt that the scene with, I think it was maybe a Greek Orthodox or somebody, that scene would be more palatable than the reality of Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel. Somebody in an executive producer, somebody said, I got an idea, let's take him out. Somebody thought that was a good idea.
I mean, I want to thank you for naming that. And I think that there's also, just again, speaking to what I would imagine people listening are feeling is that, as you said, it's really painful of really wanting to have the bridges built, of feeling like, why is this so hard? Why is this so costly? When ultimately we would, at least when you're a bridge builder, you see it as we'd all really benefit from this.
Mhm.
So I want to be mindful of our time. Um, I'm going to ask one last question, and that is, we are having this conversation in the midst of darkness and loss and pain and hearts being torn in different directions. And we're doing this so that we can have this positivity and connection. And I think that you brought so much of that in your heart and your soul to us. So I'm wondering what you want our community to know, any final last thoughts from you personally, from your faith, from your community. If there's anything that you want us to specifically take away from this conversation, that we can, look back to and in our own prayers touch on. And I think you've given us a lot of gems, but if there's any last thing you want to share, I want to make sure you have that.
I think a gathering like this of um, of you, every man, every woman on this call, on this Zoom. I think somewhere down the line could be when we end it tonight, tomorrow. I would really ask, prayerfully ask, maybe even in a prayer, I would really ask now, Lord, why did you let me? Why was I a part of that? Why did you have me Zoom in, click in, join? What what do you want me to do with that? I would keep it on a very personal level. Um, I was Lord, now what?
Mm.
What do you want me to do now? And many times it'll be, keep on walking. I'm always captured by the story in Nehemiah. Nehemiah, whatever
Nehemiah.
persuasion, whatever persuasion. And the guy said, "Come on now, come on." And he said, "I can't come down from this wall. I'm doing a great work. You know, I would, you guys, everyone on this. Let me say this: there's not a person on this call by accident. Hear me on that one. There's not a man or woman on this call by accident. Each of you can probably think of someone who, wow, so and so should have been here and you missed it. No, there's not a person here by accident. And with that revelation, my exhortation to you would be to say, Lord, now what? What do you want me to do with this? Here's my term. How can I steward this? I would just say, I'd say stay on the wall.
Hmm.
And watch what God does.
Amen. Thank you for giving us that kavanah, that intention for our prayer lives, and using that image with Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel of praying with our feet too. I think you very much so gave us that, and we are grateful for your courage in having this conversation. In that bridge building, we welcome opportunities between. And I mentioned our co-sponsoring organizations, Nativot Shalom, Moishe House based in International Rabbinic Fellowship, and the Shama Association of Jewish Chaplains. I'm just going to speak on behalf of those and say that, I think any chance for us to continue bridge building work is welcome. And we want that. And we love and appreciate the work and the heart and the soul that you're giving to that. So I want to thank you, Bishop Dr. Ulmer. I mean, such a gift. I thank our listeners, thank everyone who attended. As you said, you're not by accident. We're grateful that you took this time, and also thank God for giving us the chance to come together in this space. Our next Let's Talk about Israel is going to take place on March 27th. It's the same time, same Zoom, and we're going to be connecting with Erica Cohen Moore, who's the executive director of the National Association of Catholic Chaplains. So if you got a reminder about this, you should see that there's different dates that are coming up. We have 4 sessions slotted, and we're again extremely grateful to our first speaker, to Bishop Ulmer, for giving his heart, his time, and his soul. Thank you.